Hi, this is David Peck, Director of Research and Education at Betterbee, and this is another installment of our Interviews with Experts series. This is a really fun one for me because I'm sitting down in person with our head beekeeper here at Betterbee, Anne Frey, who is an EAS certified master beekeeper. She is in charge of keeping all of our colonies alive when we're all too busy running around to go out and do our inspections. And she doesn't like it when I say this, but she's been keeping bees for as long as I've been alive. So she knows her stuff. And what we're going to be talking about today, the expertise that Anne is here to share, and I might chime in a few times as well, is how to teach other people about beekeeping, how to teach an intro beekeeping class, or how to give a lecture at your bee club. And we realized that we have a lot of experience doing this from sort of different angles, and we thought that that might be a valuable thing to share with you as you're sitting and getting ready to give your very first bee lecture, or just trying to improve the lectures that you teach for your local bee school. We thought maybe we would offer some tips and pointers and things that we've done right or things we've done wrong.
Yeah, sure. It's been a few of those.
So thank you, Anne. Do you want to share any tips that you would give to the bee teacher?
Sure, David. I would say I've heard from actual students after a class that the amount of options that they were given in the class was overwhelming. And since I heard that, I have changed the way I teach beginner classes, and I just flat out suggest 2 wooden deeps, for instance, wooden frames with plastic foundation, Formic Pro for your miticide. You know, it's just tough on these brand new people to be expected to choose frame type, box type, box size.
Right. Deeps, mediums, polystyrene. Which kind of polystyrene?
It's too much. What kind of cover? What kind of feeder? So I tell them, this kind of feeder is my favorite. This is my favorite miticide. And then they'll have time to think about things for their 3rd and 4th hive or in the future. But.
And you don't say this is the correct way to set up a hive. You say this is the way I'm giving you for you to start up your hive. Feel free to change any and all of this. Come back to me in 10 years as a better beekeeper than I am and say, I'm doing it totally differently. But this is a way for you to get started that's not going to drown you in possibility.
And also, I would suggest that a beginner starts with a package. Coincidentally, the equipment choices that I suggest are the most economical too. So the wood,
you can tell you're a real beekeeper.
The bucket feeder, you know. So maybe
right.
That's a clue. Cheap.
So I think that's the important place to start. And often when you're talking about bees, you do start with the equipment. You say, here's all of the equipment, and people can get sort of shell-shocked by that, and they can't even pay attention to whatever you're going to talk about next. But do you find that there's a good way to transition into that conversation about what beekeeping is and cover the topics you want to cover?
Well, transitioning into what beekeeping is, I would say that at the beginning, we like to sort of list off why does anyone start beekeeping? I don't know. But, there's a little list of, I wanted to pollinate my garden or my 6 apple and pear trees, or I just want to learn about bees, which is really great too. I love that reason. Or like, I want to make money selling honey. And
do you want to get rich and find another hobby?
We go through those lists, or they say, my grandfather kept bees, and then you see the people in the class sort of nodding, and then you might ask the class if there's anything that you didn't cover, and it sort of breaks the ice to get into the actual teaching. There's a little buffer zone there at the beginning.
And it's also nice to get them talking, to get them familiar with the idea that they should ask questions if they have them, or they should. None of us is going to be a perfect lecturer. So if we give a lecture and one person's confused, the odds are good that multiple people are confused. So if they ask, then it's going to help you correct your own teaching. So let them guide you in how to be more effective the next time you give this presentation.
Yeah, and usually it's adults in the class, and they're not shy about kind of networking with each other. But if there are any younger people, it's good that they realize that it's the kind of class where people are going to be hobnobbing with each other, and they're going to learn from each other, and they have to network with each other when they're out of the class.
Mhm.
So, find a club, find another beekeeper. We're everywhere, but there's pretty few of us overall.
Right.
They have to make a connection and a support system.
Mhm.
So, started the class.
Right. What do you think is maybe the biggest mistake that a lot of presenters make? I think I have an answer, but I wonder if yours is the same as mine.
I wonder. Well, having taught a lot of classes and gone to a lot of presentations, I would say the most frustrating thing to be an audience member in a presentation, listening to somebody who says they're giving an introduction to something, but it's not an introduction to it. It's not a beginner level thing because they are so good at what they do that they forgot what a beginner feels like. So I'd say that you have to remember how it is to be a beginner.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what
Yeah.
I was going to say.
Oh, yeah?
Is that when you have someone who's an expert and they're just wallowing in their expertise and they're not
They love
bringing
it.
you into it. This was
Yeah.
something I got a lot when I was, doing research and getting my PhD,
Mhm.
is that you'd listen to scientists and they'd come in and they'd go on and on and on about their specialty. And then, I remember once I listened to a neuroscientist give a great talk about how these amazing circuits were connected to all these amazing ganglia that they were studying, and they were
Okay.
finding all this exciting stuff. But at the end of the day, at the end of the lecture, someone raised their hand and said, "What brains or what animals do these brains live in?" Basically,
Like
they were
neurons.
they were like, "Oh, I was talking about neurons. I forgot to tell you that this was inside of a rat," and everyone went, "Oh."
Sort of gives a little bit more overview of the whole
Yeah, it
situation.
gives people the context. And I think that's
Yeah.
very common in bee lectures.
Yeah.
You go in for a basic pest management and you start talking about the intricacies of varroa, but you're not talking about the honeybee brood cycle. So people who aren't familiar with that can't keep up.
Yeah, or to show them how the varroa forces its face into the bottom of the bee's belly and bites it and hangs on, that sinks into their brain better than this chart that goes,
Right.
this is the
The varroa lays
varroa's
this
life
many eggs
cycle,
Right.
It's, that's a good chart too, but,
Mhm.
to get the idea out there that it's living on the bees, or it's crawling on the brood, and those are important
Yeah.
details.
That-
So the beginner who's never even thought about bees having bugs on them,
Right.
You gotta
that,
get-
that sort of visceral reaction and the real base, the foundation is critical. And I think I will sometimes give lectures to very mixed audiences of beekeepers. That's common that you'll be asked to
Mixed
speak to a
group.
bee club,
Yeah.
and there's someone who's been keeping for 20 years more than you, and someone who hasn't gotten their bees yet. But I think the way I try to strike that balance, at least, is I want to, every time I introduce a new topic, I want to start at the foundation, and then I want to build on that foundation. So a new beekeeper gets that really basic definition given to them.
Yep.
And then I can try to get into some subtleties or some nuance that maybe the advanced beekeepers will go, "Oh, I actually didn't know that." But I've brought everybody along for the ride instead of just, standing there and talking way above everyone's heads, or so bare bones that the experienced beekeepers are like, "That guy was a hack. He didn't know what he was talking about. That was kid stuff."
I wish I never went to that.
Right.
But kind
But-
of reminds me of the adult messages inside of Looney Tunes cartoons.
Right.
So
Something thrown in for the
like,
adults to keep them
the
awake.
kids
And
get it, the beginners get it, and the adults are like, yeah.
right. But you've
But-
got to make sure that you're hitting all of those things for all of those audiences. And
Yeah.
I think something that I've seen you do a lot in your teaching, which is really helpful, is you'll often use technical words, jargon, the things that you need to know as a beekeeper, but then you define it in plain English.
Yeah, there is a lot of jargon, and I do tend to do that, especially in beginner classes. Like I remember a long time ago I was learning how to sail, and I persisted in calling the ropes, and the person teaching me was like, "Those are sheets," and I was like, "Okay," and the sail is the he's like, "No, that's a sail." That's so it was
But it
like
looks like a sheet,
I had
and
to
it-
get into
right.
the jargon, and he was persistent, and with ours, it's foundation, in other words, the midrib of the comb, super, the honey for humans that's up above the brood nest. I kind of have those phrases that just tumble out of my mouth after I say the first weird word, which is the beekeeper word that these guys have never heard of before. So it helps them, and then if I was talking with someone more experienced, I would just say the super,
Right.
the foundation.
Right.
I wouldn't do that, but to have that double layer of normal English plus jargon, yeah.
Right, you're
I think
teaching them the
that's-
jargon, but you're also not just throwing it at them. And,
I think
you know.
it's helpful, because there's a lot of weird words.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
And words that are sort of everyday words, but that we use in a very specific way, too.
foundation.
Right, exactly. It
You'd think
means
that would be
something.
the bottom board of the hive,
Yeah.
but no, that's the bottom board.
And I've had things like
Oh.
that where beekeepers will ask me a question. I'll give a long presentation where I've been talking about brood this and brood that, and they'll raise their hand, and I'll realize that they think that the brood is just the capped brood,
Oh,
or
yeah.
it's just the uncapped larvae. And so, whether is that a larva, is it a brood, is it a grub? How am I going to describe these different stages? When they ask you a question, it reveals how confused they are. That should be your note that you say, oh, next time I give this talk, I've got to make sure that I define that much
Definitely.
more explicitly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That mistake of just identifying capped worker brood as brood,
Mhm.
I've seen that a lot
Right.
too. And
There's no brood in my hive, just a bunch of larvae and eggs
Yeah,
and some
yeah,
drones.
it's-
And you're like, well,
it's like and drone brood, right?
Right.
But yeah, there's drone brood. It's a tough one, and it's a common mistake. So we recognize that as something that people trip up on, and we'll try and fix it, or just not try and fix them, but try and be more specific of how we say it. And
right, right. If your audience is confused, it's your fault, not their fault.
Ooh.
They came here to learn, right?
Yeah.
If they ask a dumb question, it's really your fault for not having pre-answered it for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might even go back even deeper, because just the word brood is not a word for most people unless they raise chickens. It's
Right.
like we have to explain to newbies what brood is and say it carefully. I met someone who had been keeping bees for maybe 3 or 4 years, and they thought the word was brew. And she was looking at the brew. And it didn't matter because she was actually looking at brood, but I thought that was a little bit funny.
And it's an opportunity to be like, by the way, before you give a talk, you might want to make sure you're right about this. And that might be a really major point to hit is if you're going to give a lecture, you should be correct.
And they may be just at the level of becoming a mentor, not giving a lecture, but that's starting out teaching somebody else.
Right. And any of that is teaching.
Yeah,
Mentoring
yeah.
one person or giving a lecture to 50 people at your club or making a YouTube video for 100,000 people to
Talking
watch.
to your family.
Yeah.
But
But you want to be correct. You don't want to teach people wrong information.
yeah, but without being pedantic. It's
Right.
like it's all just chatting with them unless you're the teacher teaching a class, but when you're a teacher teaching a class, you don't want to be that teacher that everyone hates.
Just droning on and on.
The getting super detailed or hassling somebody because they said brew, it's, don't do that stuff. But we want them to be enthusiastic and happy and inquisitive, and they like to hear little stories that happen to you. You know.
I think storytelling is a really important part of teaching, beekeeping or anything else.
Especially mistakes.
Right. What could be more fun than hearing the expert stand up there and admit when they made a mistake?
Yep.
And I will admit, I have even claimed mistakes that weren't my own. So sort of like a
Just for
stand-up
the
comic
story.
who's
Okay.
like, oh, as I was walking into the club, this funny thing happened, and actually it was a friend that told them a story
Sounds
about
good.
6 months ago.
Yeah.
But you just sort of, you own
Yeah.
that story, because if it's yours, then people will learn it better.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I learned actually working with Tom Seeley, because when he gives lectures, but also when he just writes scientific papers or writes
Yeah.
books, he always tries to make it storytelling, right? He thinks about
Mm-hmm.
the storytelling. He wants there to be some kind of a story of the science, because he knows that if he tells you the story of how he figured it out, then you'll be along for the ride, right? You're going to be interested, you're going to follow it, and you'll remember it better than if we just said, here's the graph, it proves the thing I was studying,
Yeah.
end of paper.
He starts out by, I was walking in the woods.
Exactly.
I found this tree.
Right.
You know.
And I wondered, what are those bees doing? And then,
then he goes on.
yeah.
Well, that's Tom Seeley. We should all try to be more like Tom Seeley.
Whenever possible.
Um,
But if you're giving a lecture and you say, here is the bear fence, you have to put up a bear fence because if you don't have an electric fence, the bears will eat your hives.
The end.
The end
No.
is way less memorable than if you tell a story.
Like somebody in my club had a bear knock over her 2 new beehives. She was new, the hives were new, the bees were new, and she had taken a class, and she had heard the teacher say this, and so the very next morning, no delay, they got the gear and they put up a little bear fence. And then, of course, they kept watching and they took photos of the bear that dusk who was circling it.
Came back.
And was like, and got his nose zapped and then he just sort of slouched away, disappointed. And it was like, that's such a good little story about the bear that you could
It's
put
great
into
storytelling.
the
The bear is the villain, so we've got protagonists and antagonists and all of
It's
it.
not the villain.
It's well, as far as the beekeeper's concerned.
Okay.
But you've got that narrative, you've got the emotion of, oh no, my poor bees,
Yeah.
I'm a fool, and then the bear is like, oh no,
And then
I've
they're
been
like,
vanquished by this technology.
Did he come back?
Right.
Yeah.
People remember that bear
Yeah.
fences matter in the context of that story,
Mhm.
and not if you just put up a slide on your PowerPoint that says, bear fences, install one. You'll regret it if you don't.
Maybe some percentages too.
Right, yeah.
Blah. Anyways, putting up slides. I'm a big proponent of lots of photos on the slides.
Yeah.
Less words printed on the slides. Photos that then I can glance at and I'll tell what I have prepped about that photo, and they're not reading the same words that I am saying. That's just
Right, don't just read your slides.
I don't like that at all. I had videos in the presentation.
Yep.
Little short videos.
Yeah.
They're the next best thing to going out in the bee yard, and the classes are usually in the winter before spring comes. They get the class, so there's no going out in the bee yard
Right.
during that class.
Right.
So.
But you're right. The best thing is typically, if you want to teach somebody beekeeping, you should have them in an apiary with
Yeah.
you. You should be
Yeah.
opening a hive.
Definitely.
But if you don't have that opportunity, then videos are a great way to give them some flavor of that, or bringing props in, right? It's not cheating to use a prop. To
Yeah,
bring
you
in a hive body, bring in a super, let them go through some frames, let them hold a hive tool and
Yeah.
think about which one
Try
would
it.
be more comfortable.
Try this glove. Try
Right.
these nitrile gloves. Do the lift. And when there's a break, they'll get a drink, but they'll also roam around and look at the stuff. And
Set out your props.
Yeah,
Let people
they'll people appreciate having 3D real things
Yeah.
to fiddle with, and I think that's why they like real classes better than Zoom classes.
Right.
Um,
And I think if you can take them into an apiary, do it whenever possible.
Yeah, definitely. They'll learn things that there's no way to understand with someone standing up in front of them and just talking. They're quietly watching the person smoke or pry or separate boxes, or like I knew some people who had been looking at their own bees for a couple years and never actually understood why they were pulling these frames out or what was on the frame. So in a class
They were just going for the ritual, but they didn't know what they were supposed to be looking for.
Yeah, maybe they were glancing around for the queen, but I pull them up. I say, this is here. Hold this, and I say that area there is capped worker brood. Under it, is this, and over here and up in the corner is capped honey. Let me gouge it. Now you see the honey under that wax capping, and anything I tell them about the one frame, and then that person puts it back in for me, and I get another one, and I do it repetitively, and try to get everybody holding or prying or doing something
Yeah, let everybody get involved, and you're right, repetition is, you should say really important things multiple times, you should try to get them to repeat it back to you, they should do something more than once if you really want them to remember how to do it.
Yeah.
You are providing that learning experience, and if it's an important thing, and it's worth the time to say twice or 3 times, say it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna help them internalize it better.
Especially, if they don't have a mentor, this in the bee yard class, frequently at the end of it, people are just like, they're just agog, they're like, thank you, now I know, and I see now, and it's like, it's the thing
I've
that like
been reading about
launches
that
it launches
forever,
them out to being confident and having more fun, and it's not the same on a page.
No, and I think that there's sort of a generational divide there too, where when you were learning beekeeping, the model was for the most part reading a book and getting a mentor who would show you the ropes, and you could sit and watch your mentor.
If you could get a mentor,
Right.
For me it was mainly magazines and ABC and XYZ, until I found a mentor, which was like 5 years after I started.
Wow.
And then when I found him, Aaron Morris, I was just blown away because the style that he used was so much more dexterous, and careful and caring than anything I had ever done. I was a complete bull in a china shop before I saw
smashing bees everywhere.
I was,
Yeah.
and he was not actively teaching me, but as I just watched him do it, I realized that's enough smoke, and that's how you do the loosening and not gouge up all your woodenware,
Right.
it's effective,
If you bring somebody out to the apiary and say, I'm going to teach you how to, find and mark a queen,
that's one specific.
that's the thing you're going to teach.
Yeah.
But secretly, they're also going to see how much smoke you should use and how you should take off the inner cover and where you should put it. How to get that first frame out and how to use your hive tool. So they're going to be absorbing all of that. That's really how I learned beekeeping as well. It was I came to beekeeping through science. So, I was having these high-level honeybee evolutionary behavioral ecology questions and conversations. And then at some point they were like, all right, well, you better get into a bee yard to test it. And so I was just watching these bee scientists going in and working with hives.
Yeah.
And it gave me that same mentorship experience. It's just, I would say, oh, that's how he turns that, or that's the way that gets pried up. And then I tried to emulate that myself.
I have to say, when Aaron was teaching me, he didn't actually let me do anything. So that's one difference between me teaching somebody, is I really...
You would put the hive tool in their hand.
I'm like, does anybody want to hold this? And some of them won't, but some of them are just like, they're right there as soon as you say, does anyone? And then you got to stop them from monopolizing it. But
make sure everybody has a turn.
Yes, watching the person as they work, so valuable.
Yeah.
And I think encouraging them to get in there and get those movements and feel that weight and get it up to their face, and go out in the sun so they can really see the eggs, and they have to kind of absorb all that. You only have 2 hours, and you hope they come back to another class, but at least they'll have that start.
Right. And in some ways it's sort of cheating to get somebody into the apiary because it's so fun and so exciting and so cool, and they're getting to do the thing that they get to do. But I think that there are still strategies you can use for a classroom style or a YouTube style, however you're trying to teach people.
Yeah.
That are, so we've talked about videos, we've talked about
Props.
Props are fantastic. One thing that I really like is handouts, right? Instead of everybody sitting there and scribbling down notes, you can just type up your notes ahead of time. But what I find is even more valuable than that is make somebody else do the work. If I give a lecture on a topic, I'll go and I'll Google around and say, has the Cornell Bee Lab or the Penn State Extension Service or has Betterbee put out an article that point by point explains exactly what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
And then print it. Betterbee's not going to sue you if you teach a class and pass out one of our newsletter articles. Just leave the Betterbee logo in the corner. And the same is true. You don't have to be from Pennsylvania to use the Penn State bee resources. They're writing them, they're putting them out.
Yeah.
You can download them and use them. And in general, that's going to be a really, really helpful, accurate, sort of science-based way to provide teaching supplementation to whatever your talk was about. Because you can't cover everything in the talk. So
No,
you
can't.
give them
They
the
gotta take
10-page
some-
outline, and then you talk about page 1 and page 7, and that's what you had the afternoon to talk about.
In a way, you've probably assigned them a text, or you've suggested, this is the book.
This is the book I like.
At the minimum, you've said, this is the book. And you've just trusted that book. So what you're describing is trusting these other different sources to give them some kind of handout. I like the idea of just like Pennsylvania, we like your pest book,
Right.
in Arkansas, we like your small hive beetle thing,
Right.
So, yeah.
Right, so I'll cobble together the best
Yeah.
ones from all the different states. Right, there are rules that say that you can't do that. These are just free resources.
No, it's
and,
not cheating.
Yeah, folks I really seem to appreciate that. They like to have something to hold and to flip through. If they get bored about what you're talking about, they can go read about the pests on page 6
They
or
could.
whatever.
And people seem to like to have something to doodle on too.
Yeah.
So, what have we missed? We got remember to be a beginner. Get them out there in the bee yard.
Don't use jargon without defining it.
Yeah,
use the right terminology correctly, but then explain what you mean each time.
Use jargon wisely.
Right.
Put that on your bumper
Use
sticker.
props and tools and resources within the classroom whenever possible.
Yeah, it's hard to use one of those if it's just a Zoom talk because the camera and everything. But by the time you try to figure that out, you've made a YouTube video.
Right. Although even there, you can say, "Hey, check out the chat. I've posted a link, and I want you to go read that webpage after I finish talking." That you can still disseminate other good resources in
Yeah.
your teaching.
You could post a link while you're teaching a Zoom class.
Yeah. Just go
Wow,
and type it in and say,
David.
"Whoop, there it is."
I can't do that yet.
All right, that might be too high tech.
All right.
Get somebody to assist you and post the link.
My technological helper.
The other thing that I really like to do is when I have people in front of me, even in the classroom, if I have an opportunity to get them involved, to have them be part of it. We said at the beginning, have everybody introduce themselves and say where they are in beekeeping or why they're getting into beekeeping.
Yeah.
But in a lecture on any topic or a class on any topic, I think you can really engage people by making everybody turn to their neighbor. Oh, stand up. Oh, I was dozing off, but now I'll talk to this person, and have them answer a question. So one of the things I really like doing is I've got a lecture on oxalic acid,
Yeah.
and I make everybody turn to each other and I say, should beekeepers be allowed to use illegal oxalic acid? 'Cause
Ooh,
it's
boy.
cheaper. And they all talk and they go, you get different answers depending upon the
That
different
does
crowds.
sound dangerous.
But then I say, all right, now turn to that same neighbor. Should apple growers be allowed to use pesticides and not follow the rules
Oh, nice.
because it's better for the apple growers? And the beekeepers go, oh, no, that'd be terrible
They have to
for
follow
us.
the rules.
Exactly.
All right, so they're chatting with each other.
It gets people engaged.
Yeah.
It gets them, feeling like they're part of the experience. You're part of the topic.
And
instead
not
of
just during the breaks.
Nobody wants you to just sit there and vomit information into their face. It's not an enjoyable experience.
Sounds gross.
It's a gross metaphor and a gross experience.
So in the beekeeping class, if it's not the oxalic acid class, I have had people like just turn around and tell the group or tell me, tell the group at the same time how many years they've been beekeeping or like where they live, and that might come up result in a mentoring situation in the future, or just sort of like a beekeeping buddy, like.
Right.
You live in Scroon Lake. I live in Scroon Lake.
I need help pulling my supers next
What a
week. Can you come help me lift them?
coincidence.
And,
Yeah. To have somebody that'll help you with the heavy stuff or help you do a miticide application is
Move a hive if you have to move a
yeah,
hive.
because if your family is not a beekeeper, so meeting people at these classes might be the first place that occurred to them that they were not the alone beekeeper out there, and then maybe they'll find a club and they'll meet more people too. I would definitely tell the beginners to seek out a club.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or two.
Well, and sort of maybe building on that, you were talking about us as the teacher, or the new teacher
gotta
trying
tell.
to do this. Don't set yourself up as the end all be all of bees. Don't say that everything you say
Oh,
is
yeah.
infallible and that you've taught them everything they need to
Yeah,
know.
there's
Encourage them
sources.
to learn from more people.
Right.
Always learn more. That mindset of constant learning, I think, is the most important thing we can teach to a new beekeeper. You will never stop learning. You will never know it all. The bees will keep surprising you.
I learned something yesterday.
There you go. So I think we've got an important opportunity to encourage that mindset right from the get-go.
Yeah, the way they learn, that they might have thought that it was all just Betterbee bee classes. I hope they didn't.
No,
I hope they didn't. But yeah, they can learn from the book, the magazine, the YouTube videos, their clubs, club number 2.
Right. If the club offers a class.
The old man who lives in the woods over there,
If you have 10 beekeeping classes available, don't choose which is the best. Take them all.
Take them all.
Yeah.
Sure, take them all.
Compare them. And then you can recommend. You can say, 8 out of the 10 agreed on this. The other 2 didn't. So maybe don't take that class when you're the mentor next time.
Or you'll hear, their great uncle said, just, harvest the honey in August and everything's great, but the class always said, kill the mites, so what the heck, and they have to compare those two very different.
And realize that maybe great uncle Dan was, mites hadn't shown up in the U.S. when he was a beekeeper.
Yeah, so he's got some great techniques and things to teach them, but to add on and layer on.
He shouldn't be their miticide schedule guy.
Yeah, not the miticide teaching, but the beekeeping teaching maybe. Layered up.
I think probably my core recommendation to somebody who's teaching about bees is to remember how infectious enthusiasm is. When you go and you stand in front of a group of beekeepers at a bee club or a meeting or a class or whatever it is, not everybody wants to be a beekeeper, but everybody in that room has decided they do.
Yeah,
we're weirdos.
They came to you.
We're all weirdos, and we're weirdos finding each other. And so that's why you've got to get everybody's cell phone number. Not everyone is going to come out in the middle of the night to help you move a hive that got knocked over by a bear, but a beekeeper will.
Well,
and I think that enthusiasm as a teacher is also important, right? We're enthusiastic about bees because we think they're really cool and we really like doing this. Yeah. So if you share that and project that, it'll keep people awake.
Yeah, they'll stay awake through the class. Yeah, they'll also realize that they're not so weird, and every club has its own little thing where the weirdos of this style meet up.
Right, we're weird, but we're not alone.
They're weird together. So that's valuable for anybody who's starting out something new. But getting everybody's cell phone numbers in the first class, maybe not.
Well, that might be a little bit too extroverted. Yeah. But if you make a friend, make sure that you can contact them or figure out what bee meeting they're going to next.
Yeah, so you don't have to just call them the tallest guy in the class or whatever. And I guess the wrap up here is that beekeeping is fun or should be fun. That beginners think differently.
Right. Don't try to remember what it was like when you didn't know anything before you try to teach somebody who doesn't know anything.
Yeah. For some people, it's harder to remember what it was like when they didn't know anything, but I find it easy to regress back there.
to clear my mind and go, oh, I've forgotten it all.
Oh, I know nothing. So, if you were teaching an alien or a child, how to set up a lawn chair, it would be different than if you were just telling your neighbors, set up those chairs, so it's a level of understanding and now I'm just rambling, so.
Well, I guess it is time to wrap up.
Is it? All right, this is fun.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us, Anne. This has been really fantastic.
You're welcome. Just a couple tangents.
Consider signing up for some of the classes we teach at Betterbee. It might be Anne or myself teaching you, and we'll put into practice some of what we've been talking about. But if you are getting ready to teach your own bee class, I hope this has been useful or at least interesting to you to learn some of these tips and tricks from us. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe so that we can keep bringing great content like this to you, and you can learn more about how to teach more people how to be beekeepers, and eventually the whole world will be beekeepers.
Ooh, I hope not.